So last week's Torah reading brought us the story, among others, of the 5 daughters of Zelophechad. I ask myself every year, why has no one started bringing back the name Zelophechad for their kids? But I kind of feel like we're this close to somebody in Brooklyn actually doing it. It's either for a kid or for like a pug. It'll be one or the other, you know. And the 5 daughters of Zelophechad, who should have a namesake, are Machla, Tirzah, Chogla, Milcah, and Noah. Some of those names are in regular use. These 5 daughters asked to be granted an inheritance from their father's lands because he had no sons. And this is, of course, during a time when only sons could inherit property. So if, in the same way that we think of today, if it's passed down through the paternal line, if you're a Kohen, if you're a Levite, right, those tribes, like there was a time when that was actually connected to land, not just where you're going to get the first aliyah. So the 5 daughters, whose names are repeated many times to make sure we know them, approached Moses last week's reading to request that they be able to inherit. And I have to say, with all of the patriarchal mishigas of the Torah, of Judaism, it continues to be amazing to me just how many named women we know who in the Torah request things from God, from people around them, who pray for specific outcomes, and who are granted those things. Like, that is something that I am constantly amazed by. And in this case, too, God and Moses both agree with the 5 daughters of Zelophechad, with Machla, Tirzah, Chogla, Milcah, and Noah, that there is no justice, that their family's inheritance could be lost. And so they grant them the rights to their father's lands, successfully changing the way Israelite inheritance law works. Yeah, wow, exactly. Right. And it seems, last week's reading, it seems like it's this simple, happy ending to a story of an injustice that gets corrected, right? Nope. I mean, well, not, stay tuned is always the answer about at the end of any Torah reading is like, come next week, because there'll be more. So at the end of this week's Torah reading, which we'll be reading in the morning, the end of the book of Numbers, there's an unexpected sequel to the daughters of Zelophechad's story. So here's an abbreviated chunk of what we'll be chanting tomorrow morning. The family heads of the tribe of Joseph appealed to Moses and the chieftains of the Israelites. They said, God assigned the land to the Israelites and now has given the portion of our kinsman Zelophechad to his daughters. If they marry into another tribe, their share of the land will be cut off from their ancestral portion and be added to the tribe they marry into, and our portion will be permanently diminished. So Moses, at God's bidding, said to the Israelites, the plea of the tribe of Joseph is just. This is what God commanded concerning the daughters of Zelophechad. They may marry anyone they wish, only within families of their father's tribe. No inheritance of the Israelites may pass from one tribe to another, but the heirs must remain bound to the ancestral portion of their tribe. So Machla, Tirzah, Chogla, Milcah, and Noah, Zelophechad's daughters, married their kinsmen, descendants of Manasseh, son of Joseph, and their share remained in the tribe of their father. So it turns out that our simple story of a problem being fixed was not so simple. Justice for Machla and Tirzah and Chogla and Milcah and Noah is important, but in the tribal system, continuity is also important. The land given to one tribe cannot be transferred to another tribe. The tribes have to each have a portion. So this response, the daughters may inherit, but they can only marry within their tribe, it's unsatisfying, right? It's an effort, but it's unsatisfying. And the daughters complying with it and marrying within the tribe, marrying cousins and second cousins and third cousins, it might feel disappointing that they don't push back. But as we know from our own history, both past and present, one step towards progress is often followed by another step backwards, or several, or sometimes sideways. So the end of this piece of the story is also really the end of the book of Numbers, the 4th of the 5 books of the Torah. And at the end of each book, 5 times in each yearly cycle, we have this wonderful moment where we finish the book of the Torah, we finish chanting in synagogue, and we immediately, the whole community chants together, Hazak, Hazak, Ve-nit'hazek. Be strong, and together we will be strengthened. So why would we come back to this part of the story of these 5 daughters of Zelophechad and this compromise that kind of makes it work? right at the end of the whole book. I will admit, I am a former English teacher. I always assume that in any piece of writing, you save your strongest argument, like your most important point, for the end, right? So why are we ending here? The final line of the book of Numbers, immediately following this coda, reads, "These are the commandments and regulations that God enjoined upon the Israelites through Moses on the steppes of Moab at the Jordan near Jericho." What does this verse tell us? The Israelites are this close to their destination. They're at the Jordan River, near Jericho, looking over the river into what they have been told is like the promised land. That's the place where they will not only be free from slavery, it's where they can be who they are without oppression, where I'm imagining them standing there right at the edge, right after this long journey through the desert. They're standing there looking over the river, and they're thinking, oh my God, once we get there, everything's going to be perfect. Everything's going to be great. It's going to be so good. Our society is going to be the most just. It's going to be nothing like Egypt. We'll plant our gardens, we'll harvest our crops, and live on our own terms. So we know beginnings have a lot of promise, right? There's no such thing as perfection. The society the Israelites eventually build still has flaws and still has complex issues of justice that need solving. When we work for justice, when we speak up for equal rights, we have to navigate communal needs that might be in conflict with each other. It is incredibly rare that a step towards justice is an easy process with a clearly defined end. And a lot of what Moses does as a leader is listen to each of the Israelites and try to weigh the many different needs. So last week we read God and Moses say, the request that Zelophechad's daughters made is just. And then this week we read that God and Moses say, the request that the tribe of Joseph made is just. And honestly, it sounds a lot to me like Tevye and Fiddler on the roof saying, you're right, and you're right. And right, what do they say to them? You know, Reb Tevye, how can they both be right? And he says, oh, you're also right. Well, and immediately after this moment of, you're right, and you're right, that's when we say together, Hazak, Hazak, Ve-nit'hazek, be strong, and we will strengthen each other. Each time we stand up for justice for ourselves, Hazak, we are strengthened. Each time we stand up for justice for someone else, Hazak, we're strengthened. And each time we really listen to each other and try to move closer to real justice for everyone, we are strengthening each other. Ve-nit'hazek. Shabbat shalom.